you can't outperform your physical ability. You just can't. So it's actually your best workout that shows you how fit you are. So honestly, if you have 3 bad workouts and 1 good one, ignore the bad 3 workout because like you couldn't have done that best workout if you weren't physically capable of doing it. Like, you know what I mean? It wasn't a miracle. Right. You didn't get lucky. Like, your body had the capability to do that, and that's what you see the champions do. Like, again, you don't want to have 3 bad workouts for every good one, but the people who gain the most confidence out of the same training, they understand that, you know. And it's not a matter of like being like it's actually true. You know, it's actually just realistic. It's like, you know, I couldn't have done that unless I was capable of it. So who cares about, you know, tomorrow's bad workout?
So these key workouts, can you just from a coaching perspective, like how often do you program key workouts? When you say you're setting people up for success on them, does that mean that you're like not maybe tapering for them, but like making sure that people are primed and ready for them? What are key workouts? What would be an example of a key workout?
Sure. Yeah. So in the world, you know, it's like we have this 80-20 rule where 80% of training is low intensity, 20% it's moderate.
We could learn a lot from that because ours is like 99 and 100 in the opposite direction. 99 to 99.
The funny thing is, like, you can go a lot harder if you go easy most of the time. So, like me, I love running fast, but what enables me to really crush a key workout is that I spend most of my time not running fast. So it's like sort of like the slow stuff with the broccoli you got to eat in order to get the dessert of running fast. But anyway, so in our world, that's like the key workouts are those 20%. So, you know, if you're like a 6 or 7 times a week athlete, or you have 6 or 7 workout training sessions per week, probably 2 of those are going to be key workouts. If you're more like
that's very consistent with what we talk about as well. Like go hard once a week type thing. Yeah, say 1 to 2 times a week, depending on age and experience and other stuff. Okay, so with this confidence thing, it seems like there's also this other level we should be aware of, which is overconfidence and people lacking the ability to brace for workouts. And I see this a lot. Like this is the thing that since I read your book has probably been the most evident thing for me, is where people they don't realize how hard it's going to be, and people can go into workouts overconfident, and then they basically it's that saying like everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Right.
But this idea like of understanding how hard the effort's going to be is so beneficial to your performance coming out of it.
Yeah. You know, I think that this study that I'm about to describe came out after that book came out. I believe that there was a great study on that phenomenon where they had people, I think it was like hold a plank for time, like hold a plank as long as you can. And before they had people do it twice. And before the first one, they had people, they asked like, how long do you think you can hold this plank? And so everyone, you know, made their guesses, and then they sort of correlated people, you know, their sort of what they thought they could do with what they could actually do, and then they got a chance to repeat it. The ones who had like a little bit of self-doubt going into it were actually the ones who improved the least or changed the least from the first plank to the second. So you had some who thought, oh, I can only hold a plank 2 seconds, and you know, maybe they could hold it a lot longer than that. And you had some who were like, oh, I can hold a plank for 24 hours, and then they only hold it for 2 seconds. And then some were like really close, and the ones who were really close changed the least from the first to the second. And what that study shows is that if you basically you'll never try harder than when you expect to be trying as hard as you can. So if you're overconfident, what you walk into is a situation where like, oh my God, like I'm a little out of my depth here. Like I thought I could hold this plank for 24 hours and like it ain't gonna happen. So what happens is it doesn't really matter how long you can hold the plank. It's like, can you actually stay on the poles long? Like, can you actually perform closer to your limit? And people who are overconfident, that's the problem. Is that when it starts to get hard, they crumble. Whereas if you have a little bit of self-doubt, like realistic self-doubt, then you're like, well, I'm ready for a challenge. And so that those people, they ended up performing the same in the first and the second one because they had actually tried harder in the first one because they had a little bit of self-doubt, realistic self-doubt.
Yeah, I love that I'm ready for a challenge type thing. One of our sayings is, expect adversity and expect to overcome it because we want you to know that this is going to be hard. Like, our sport is hard. Like, it's hard. And what I've seen is, like, even like the super highest level, so we had a, stage 1 of the CrossFit Games last year was done because of COVID protocols in people's gyms. And the hardest workout of the whole thing was this workout called Friendly Fran. And we had an athlete that watched other people that did not make the games do the workout. And the people that they watched went unbroken and crushed it. So because of that, so in your world, it would be like, imagine like they were doing this really hard course and they ran it in, on sub 5-minute miles. So they're like, oh my gosh, I'm here, I qualify for this, I know I'll be able to do it for faster than they did it. And when this athlete got into it, it was so much harder than they expected that even though they had the capacity to do that, they, I don't say melted, but so drastically underperformed because they weren't ready for it because they undershot the difficulty of the task.
Right.
Yeah. As people become more, and you've used the word a couple times now of like aware, like in the attention aspect, but as people become more aware of this fire walking mentality, is there, so I kind of experienced this myself. I read the book a little bit. It's like you get really fired up. Like you get really fired up. Like, all right, because you get a lot of this extrinsic motivation, and you get kind of like I want to be this mental beast. I want to be like all the people that you reference. Is there kind of the opposite of like a Dunn-Kruger effect where you like, now that there's so much awareness to this, like you see the gap between where you're jumping off the coals and your possibility that actually like there's this realize how the gap can be bigger at the beginning?
That's entirely possible. Like that's not the feedback yet.
So I've seen with a couple of my athletes that are mentally tough, that are very mentally tough. We expose them to more awareness about mental toughness, and in the short term, they get mentally weaker.
Yeah. I mean, I believe it. I mean, I wouldn't call you a liar anyway, but yeah, I mean, I see the potential of that. Ultimately, like, there are no quick fixes anyway. So, as just a matter of principle, I'm a believer that reality is always the way. Like the truth will. There's no where you're trying to get to as an athlete. You want to know the way things are. Even if it's bad news, there might be a short-term hit, but in the long run, you're better off just. I'll give you a weird example. Like, I wrote this book years ago called Racing Weight, and it was about like performance weight management for endurance athletes. And so I wrote it years ago. Actually, it's my all-time best-selling book. But there's no way I could get that book published today because there's so much backlash against focusing on, and it's most of it is very well intentioned, but people being too focused on weight and appearance and under eating is a huge problem in endurance sports, and so now weight management in endurance sports has become kind of third rail. We don't talk about that, and to me that's not right. It's like yeah, there's a bit of a Pandora's box when you address that subject, but I don't think you're doing anyone a service by pretending that weight doesn't matter. It does matter. There are just healthy and unhealthy ways to go about it, and there are some people, like, given their psychology or vulnerabilities, they just need to not go there. But it doesn't mean we should not do anything. You know what I mean? I just think that's true for
we talk about that in our sport as well. Even like we talk about ideal body fat percentages and the optimal weight. We have the same conversations. And there's this unsaid, like, like, stay away from that. But I love it, and that's it's this idea that other people. So I alluded to it. We've started an academy where we have some of the best athletes in our sport in the world training together, and people have been so kind of self-included about how this dynamic is going to work. And you reference a thing called the group effect, and everyone in our sport knows this as well. But I'd love to hear your some more context on it. But in our sport, it's the reason that we train, even at the novice level, we train in groups. Like, there's no one-on-one CrossFit training. Very, very little. It's mostly for special populations. But our dynamic, we know it works best when it's done in groups. And it's this idea that if you're pulling on a rower and you're rowing a 5K, when the coach walks behind you and they see the monitor, everyone's pace ticks a little bit faster because there's eyeballs on you. Can you give a little more context to what the group effect is and why it's such a psychological performance?
Yeah, I mean, human beings are social animals, and some of us might like to think that we're islands. We're not influenced by other people, but we are. And I think most people buy it, that you can perform better in a group context than you can alone. But I think a lot of people assume that the mechanism is entirely competitive in nature, that, when you're in a group and you know how you measure up against people around you, you're motivated, to stay on the coals a little longer, dig a little deeper. And that's absolutely true, but there's actually a second mechanism that's almost the opposite, which is a cooperative element. And I think I described a study in that book about behavioral synchrony. I'm pretty sure. And that involved rowers, actually, where they found that rowers who did like solo ergometer time trials and then repeated the same time trial in a group, exactly the same time trial, not only did they perform better in the group context, but they did a pain test. There are various experimental ways to induce pain that don't actually hurt you. They don't hit you over the head with a hammer.
Hit you over the hand.
And they actually, right? They actually, a lot of them are cold water.
Yeah, I've seen putting a hand in the ice bucket. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But the rowers actually felt less pain after the group time trial, and that's because of endorphin release in the group context. So part of it is actually that when that behavioral synchrony is thing, any time you do something at the same time other people around you are doing it, even if it's not competitive in nature, you release happy chemicals in your brain, and so you're able to. That's one of those things that actually makes any given level of effort feel easier. So the competition side makes you go deeper and willing to suffer more, and then the cooperative side actually makes you actually suffer less, or feel less exertion at any given level of output.
So if you want to suffer more, find a buddy.
There you go.
All right, I think that's a great spot to wrap this up, Matt. I really appreciate it. Matt's got a whole bunch of books, more than 4, I realized after he said that. But he also preaches in a whole bunch of different subjects. I know you're really big into, as you talk about, the weight management and nutrition side of endurance training, and certainly more than just the psychological aspect. But certainly for anyone that's listened to this podcast for a while, knows how much we talk about mindset and the power of mindset, how it is the base of all. Forget about athletic performance. It is, in terms of happiness, fulfillment in our lives, that's where it kind of the root of it all begins. So if you haven't haven't read it already, check it out. It's How Bad You Want It. Matt, where else can people find you?
My personal website is mattfitzgerald.org. My online training business is called 80/20 Endurance, 80/20endurance.com, and then I'm on all the usual social media sites.
Well, Matt, really appreciate it. And that's hopefully we get you back on and talk about some of your other work, including nutrition stuff.
Sounds good. I enjoyed it.
You can get every episode of Chasing Excellence wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Until next time, thank you for listening.
Oh.
65. 65. Yeah.